Sixth Grade Secrets, published in 1987 by Louis Sachar. Table of Characters. This is a list of some of the people in Laura's class. Laura has been going to the school for over 6 years, so she knows everybody there fairly well. But unless you happen to go to Laura's school, you may have trouble remembering who is who. This list is here to help you if you need it. These aren't all the people in Laura's class, just the ones who are mentioned in the book at least twice. Laura, our hero. If you forget who she is, then you'll need more than this list to help you. Tiffany, ticklish, has trouble eating spaghetti. Allison, always wears clean underwear. Gabriel has copied more dictionary pages than anyone else in Mr. Doyle's class. Mr. Doyle, the best teacher in the school. The worst teacher in the school. Take your pick. Kristen, small face, big glasses. Sheila, frizzy hair, hates Laura, sits behind Gabriel. Debbie, hangs upside down before tests. Howard, wants everybody to like him. Nobody does. Karen, talks all the time. Yolanda's best friend. Nothing bothers her, not even Gabriel. Yolanda, very shy, very pretty. Karen's best friend. Jonathan, smartest, fastest, strongest, and most handsome boy in Mr. Doyle's class, and he knows it. Nathan, talks funny, likes to watch turkeys play football. Aaron, good singer. His grandmother picks out his clothes for him. Lindsay, teacher's pet, has never had to copy a dictionary page. There are 15 other kids in Mr. Doyle's class who didn't make this list. I hope they don't feel too bad. I'm sure they are interesting people too, and maybe someday some other author will write a story about them. Part 1. The Treasures of Pig City. 1. Laura. It all started with a hat. Laura was at a garage sale with her friends Tiffany and Allison. "Ew, don't put that on your head," said Allison. "You don't know where it's been. It might have lice." Laura hesitated a moment, then put it on her head. She realized Allison might be right, but she also thought it was a tacky thing to say in front of the man who used to wear it. Anyway, the man was bald, so how could he have lice? "How much?" she asked. The bald man smiled. He was missing a front tooth. "Well, it was $1, he said, "but since you're so pretty, you can have it for 50 cents. It was a red cap with a blue brim. In silver letters above the brim were the words Pig City. It fit snug, but not too tight over her very long brown hair. "What do you think?" she asked her friends. Tiffany looked up from a box of records and laughed. "It's cute," she said. "Everything looks good on you, Laura," Allison agreed. Laura bought the cap, but insisted on paying the original price, $1. She didn't think she should get it any cheaper just because she was pretty. "What does Pig City mean?" Tiffany asked the man. He didn't answer. He just winked at her. Laura knew her parents wouldn't like the cap. They never liked any clothes she bought at garage sales. They couldn't understand why she'd want to wear somebody's old clothes when they'd buy her anything she wanted new. But where would she be able to find a new cap that said Pig City on it? Well, actually, she remembered there was a store at the mall where they sold caps with anything anyone wanted printed on them. Still, it wasn't the same. The thing that made this cap so special was that she didn't buy it at the mall. It was like Allison had said, you don't know where it's been. That was why she liked it. What was Pig City? It was mysterious. "How do you know it doesn't have lice?" Allison asked as the three girls walked away. "He was bald," said Laura. "So?" asked Allison. "He wasn't always bald." "How do you know?" asked Tiffany. "Maybe he was born bald." "Everybody's born bald," said Laura. Tiffany laughed. "Well, I wouldn't put somebody else's hat on my head," said Allison. "What if the man used to be a pig farmer?" Allison had short brown hair, neatly combed and parted just a little off center. Her face was clean, fresh, and healthy looking. Her teeth were white and her fingernails were neatly trimmed. You could tell just by looking at her that she always wore clean underwear. "Maybe Pig City is the name of a health club," said Tiffany, "where fat people go to lose weight." Allison laughed. "Or where slobs go to learn good manners," she added. Laura laughed. "What if it really is a city?" asked Tiffany, "and the only people who live there are fat slobs with bad manners?" They all laughed. "Maybe it's a beautiful city," said Laura, "with flowers everywhere and trees and beaches. They just call it Pig City to keep the tourists away." "Wouldn't that be great?" said Allison. "And not too many people would want to live in a city named Pig City either, so it's not crowded or polluted." "It's the most wonderful place in the world," said Tiffany, "just like the Garden of Eden. And nobody wears clothes, just fig leaves." Tiffany probably changed her underwear every day too, only you couldn't tell just by looking at her. Something about her was always messy. Her clothes never fit right. The more she tried to comb her hair, the worse it got. I'm going to be a pig farmer when I grow up, Laura declared. Tiffany laughed. I thought you wanted to be president, said Allison. I can do both, said Laura. You're only allowed to be president for 8 years. Laura's goal was to be the first woman president of the United States. That was why it bothered her when people told her she was pretty. Nobody ever told George Washington he was pretty. Laura had little doubt that she would someday be president. It was just a question of whether or not she'd be the first woman. She was afraid another woman might beat her to it. Just as George Washington is known as the father of our country, someday she wanted to be known as the mother of our country. If you're a pig farmer, you'll have to kill pigs, Tiffany pointed out. Oh, I could never do that, said Laura. That's how they make their money, said Tiffany. They raise pigs until they're big and fat. Then they butcher them, just so people can eat bacon. It's disgusting. What about the farmers who just have dairy cows? Asked Allison. They don't kill their cows. They just milk them and make money by selling the milk. But Laura wants to be a pig farmer, not a cow farmer, said Tiffany. Oh, said Allison. So, she asked, why can't she milk pigs? Pigs are mammals. They have milk too. They had been studying mammals in Mr. Doyle's class. Pig milk? Questioned Tiffany. Yes, exclaimed Laura. She liked that idea. You've heard of goat milk. Why not pig milk? It will be a new product. And pig cheese. I'll be the only one selling it, so I'll make lots of money. How about pig yogurt? Suggested Allison. Yogurt already tastes like it comes from pigs anyway. And pig butter, said Laura. And pig cottage cheese, said Allison. And pig ice cream, Tiffany joined in. When Laura was 4 years old, her father told her about George Washington. It was the day before her first day of kindergarten. She was supposed to get her hair cut. She threw a temper tantrum. No, she screamed and cried. I don't want to get my hair cut. No, 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 no. She stomped angrily around the house, kicking things. When she kicked a table in the living room, the lamp on top of it fell and broke. She instantly stopped crying. Her father rushed in when he heard the crash. He looked at Laura, then at the broken lamp. How did this happen? He demanded. I don't know, Daddy, Laura said innocently. I was just standing here when the lamp suddenly broke. He didn't get angry or accuse her of lying. Instead, he told her the story of George Washington and the cherry tree, and how George later grew up to be the first president of the United States, the father of our country. When he finished, Laura stared bravely into her father's eyes and said, I cannot tell a lie. I broke the lamp. Just as George Washington didn't get in trouble for chopping down the cherry tree, Laura Sibbie didn't get in trouble for breaking the lamp. She didn't have to get her hair cut either. Her parents promised she'd never have to get her hair cut, as long as she never told another lie. She was now in 6th grade. There was only a month and a half left of school. Her hair was long and thick and reached down below her waist. She hadn't lied yet. Pig ice cream? Questioned Allison. Yuck-ola. 2. Pig City. Laura wore the cap every day for a week. Her parents got used to it. Everybody in school made some dumb comment about it, but soon they got used to it too. By the end of the week, it had become a part of her. She would have looked strange without it. We'll be in the doghouse, Laura shouted, then slammed the door behind her. Tiffany and Allison were waiting in the backyard, sucking on grape popsicles. They liked coming to Laura's because there was always good food to eat. The doghouse was big enough for a dog the size of an elephant. It was built by Laura's father and her oldest brother over 15 years ago. Laura had 2 brothers and 1 sister, but they were much older than she was. None of them lived at home. It was called the doghouse because from the outside it looked like a giant doghouse with a door. Also, the name of the first club to use it was the Dogs. Since then it had become home to the Paul McCartney Fan Club, the Spiders, the Cowgirls, the Destroyers, the Erasers, the Devils, and now a new club, Pig City. Laura was the president of Pig City. Allison said she should be mayor and not president because it was a city and not a country, but she was outvoted. Tiffany was vice president and Allison was secretary. So far, they were the only members. They entered the doghouse. Tiffany plopped down on a purple beanbag chair. Allison sat on a bed covered by a black and white check bedspread. Laura sat in a swinging bamboo chair that hung from the ceiling. There was also a bookcase, a television, 2 lamps, a coffee table, and various other odds and ends, mostly odds. Nearly everything came from garage sales. Nothing electrical worked, which didn't matter since there were no electrical outlets. They had a battery-operated cassette tape recorder if they wanted to listen to music. Laura made a fist with her right hand, then raised it and held it lengthwise against her nose, like a pig's snout. Allison and Tiffany did the same. Then they all solemnly lowered their fists. It was the secret Pig City salute. Pig City was a secret club. It had to be. Clubs were no longer allowed at Laura's school. Earlier in the year, there were several clubs, but a parent complained because her child couldn't join one. After that, clubs were no longer allowed. "You're first, Allison," said Laura. Allison blushed. "What'd you bring, Allison?" asked Tiffany. Allison removed a photograph from her jacket pocket and set it on the coffee table. "You don't have to stare at it," she exclaimed. It was a picture of her when she was 3 years old, naked in the bathtub. "I got it out of my parents' album," she said. "Can you believe it? They used to show it to everyone who came over. I'd be sitting right there in the room with them, and they'd show the album to their friends with that picture in it. 'How adorable,' they'd say. 'How precious.' Every one of my parents' friends has seen my butt." Tiffany laughed. "Aw, how adorable," said Laura. "It's not funny," said Allison. She turned the picture over. Laura had a jewelry box that looked just like an old-time pirate's treasure chest. She opened it and placed Allison's picture face down on the torn red felt. "Your turn, Tiffany," Allison said, "and it better be something good." "It's better than yours," said Tiffany. "I mean worse." Tiffany's lips were purple from the grape popsicle. She unfolded what looked like the front page of a newspaper. A huge banner headline proclaimed, "Tiffany's Ticklish." Allison and Laura laughed. Laura moved to the bed next to Allison, and they read it together. "Tiffany, the world-famous spaghetti eater, is ticklish. That's right, ticklish. It has been conclusively established by our team of expert ticklers that she is ticklish all over. A finger under her chin will cause her to giggle for hours. Squeeze her sides and she will jump 6 feet in the air. Touch a feather to her toes and watch her writhe on the floor in a fit of uncontrollable laughter. Tickle her armpits at your own risk. Caution, do not tickle her while she is eating spaghetti, or she will dump her plate on your head." "It's not funny," said Tiffany. "Everybody who reads that stupid thing tries to tickle me." "Where'd it come from?" asked Allison. "Oh, my uncle had it made at a carnival we all went to. He wrote it himself, of course. It's so stupid." "Did you really dump a plate of spaghetti on his head?" asked Laura. "No," Tiffany scowled. "That's another one of his so-called jokes he thinks is funny. He always makes fun of me because of one time when we went to an Italian restaurant I got spaghetti sauce on my clothes. Of course, he thought it was hilarious." Laura got a peacock feather out of a blue vase on top of the bookcase. She held it menacingly over Tiffany, who was somewhat trapped in the beanbag chair. Just the sight of the feather made Tiffany giggle. "Get away!" she squealed. Allison reached over and squeezed Tiffany's side. She jumped out of the chair. Laura put the feather back in the vase and placed Tiffany's newspaper article in the treasure chest. "Your turn, Laura," said Tiffany. Laura took a folded piece of notebook paper out of the back pocket of her blue jeans and dropped it onto the coffee table. She returned to her swinging bamboo chair. Allison unfolded Laura's paper. "Wow," she said, and then handed it to Tiffany. "Declaration of love. I, Laura Sibbie, declare, now and forever, that I'm in love with my teacher, Mr. Doyle. I dream about him all the time, and if I was older, I'd like to marry him. With all my heart, Laura Sibbie." Tiffany gasped. "Mr. Doyle?" asked Allison. "You're kidding." "I never lie," said Laura. "I guess he's all right for a teacher," said Tiffany. Laura placed her declaration of love in the treasure chest. She raised her fist to her nose. Tiffany and Allison did the same. Laura spoke. "If any one of us ever tells anybody anything about Pig City, the other two will show her secret to the whole school." They lowered their fists. 3. Mr. Doyle. Wednesday morning Laura sneaked into the school building before school started. The main doors were locked, but she knew of a side door that would be open. She cautiously looked around, then walked boldly toward Mr. Doyle's room, as if she had every right to be there. Her school was once what was known as an open school. There were no walls between the classrooms, but in the last few years the administration had done their best to close it. Large wooden bookcases now separated one room from another. The door to Mr. Doyle's room was a yellow curtain hung between two metal closets. Laura pushed through. Mr. Doyle wasn't there. She knew he wouldn't be. He was sitting at a table in the teacher's lounge, drinking coffee and talking to the other teachers. That's where he was every morning. She sometimes fantasized about sitting there with him, drinking coffee and talking about interesting and important topics. She thought it sounded very romantic. In the upper right-hand corner of the blackboard was the word dictionary. Laura felt a pang of terror as she looked at that word. It was the most feared word in Mr. Doyle's class. She picked up a piece of chalk and wrote in big letters in the center of the board, "Pigs rule." Then she set down the chalk, then walked back through the school and out the side door. Safe outside, she breathed a huge sigh of relief. Someone tapped her shoulder. She spun around. "Oink, oink," said Gabriel. She forced a smile. Gabriel was a boy in her class. Ever since she started wearing her Pig City cap, he said "oink, oink" to her whenever he saw her. She wondered if he had seen her come out of the building. She decided it didn't matter. Gabriel wouldn't tell on her. He never told on anyone, even though everybody was always telling on him. Gabriel had copied more dictionary pages than anybody else in Mr. Doyle's class. That was Mr. Doyle's unique method of punishment. When kids got in trouble, they had to copy a page out of the dictionary. They had to copy everything on the page, including the Latin origins and all the pronunciation symbols. Laura hated the little upside-down E's the worst. She had copied 5 pages over the year. She figured Gabriel had probably copied a whole dictionary by now. "Oink, oink," he said again. She turned and walked away. Her hair swished around behind her, just missing his face. Allison and Tiffany came across the blacktop. They raised their fists to their noses. Laura returned the salute. They tried to decide whom else to ask to join Pig City. They finally decided on Kristen because she was smart. The problem was how to ask her while still keeping the club a secret. Laura didn't tell them about her message on the board. She wanted it to be a surprise. When the bell rang, they lined up and marched into class. Laura heard everybody ahead of her laugh at Pig's Rule. She laughed too. If she hadn't, Mr. Doyle would have known she was the one who had written it. That was why he hadn't erased it yet. She knew how his mind worked. He wanted to see who didn't laugh. "You have to get up pretty early in the morning to try to outsmart me, Mr. Doyle," she thought. He would have to get up very early if he wanted to get up before Laura. Her alarm went off at 5:43. It took her an hour just to shampoo, comb, brush. "Please," Mr. Doyle said. She stood up, lifted her cap, shook her hair back, and put the cap back on. She walked confidently to his desk. "Do you know anything about this?" he asked. She had to be careful not to lie. She read aloud from the blackboard. "Pigs rule. What about it?" "Why don't you tell me?" said Mr. Doyle. "How would I know?" she asked. He smiled. "It's written on your hat." Laura took off her cap and carefully studied the front of it. Then she looked at the board. "My hat doesn't say Pigs Rule, Mr. Doyle. It says Pig City." She brushed her hair back off her face and put the cap back on. He stared at her. She smiled innocently back at him. She thought he was extremely handsome when he was being serious. He was tall and very thin. He had a pale face with sunken cheeks and very cute curly brown hair. She thought he looked like he read lots of good books. "Do you know who wrote it?" he asked. "It couldn't have been a pig," said Laura. "Pigs can't write." "No, but 6th-grade girls can," he said. "I know," said Laura. "We learned how to print in the 1st grade." He told her to go back to her seat. She turned around, swishing her hair behind her. She smiled at Tiffany and Allison. They were obviously very impressed. She raised her fist to her nose, then quickly lowered it. They did the same. Her desk was on one side of the room. Tiffany's was on the other side, and Allison was in the middle at the front. Mr. Doyle had learned at the beginning of the year to keep those 3 girls separated. She sat down. "Lindsay, will you erase the board, please?" said Mr. Doyle. Laura felt a little jealous as she watched Lindsay erase the board. Lindsay sat at the desk closest to Mr. Doyle and was always doing things for him. She was Teacher's pet. She was the only person in the class who hadn't copied at least one dictionary page. "I wouldn't want to be Teacher's pet anyway," thought Laura. "That's sickening. I can be in love with him without having to be his pet." She put her hands behind her head, leaned back, and smiled contentedly. 4. Kristen. Outside at recess, Allison and Tiffany were all excited. They thought Pig's Rule was the greatest thing they'd ever seen. "There's Kristen," said Allison. Kristen was bent over, drinking from the water fountain. They walked up behind her. "Hey!" Tiffany shouted. Kristen jumped and then had to cough out water that went down the wrong way. She turned around to face them. She wore big red glasses that covered almost half of her mousy little face. She was cute, but everyone thought she'd be cuter if she didn't have to wear glasses. Everyone was wrong. It was the glasses that made her look so cute. Everyone also thought she was very intelligent. That wasn't true either. It was her glasses that made her look smart. Tiffany, Laura, and Allison formed around next to the water fountain just outside the library. "We have a question to ask you," said Tiffany. "Okay," said Kristen. "Only we can't ask you the question," said Allison, "until we know your answer." "How can I answer until I know the question?" Kristen asked. "You just have to answer yes or no," Allison said. "But you can't change your mind," said Tiffany. "So what is it?" Laura demanded. "Yes or no?" "What?" asked Kristen. "Yes or no?" asked Tiffany. "I have to know the question," Kristen insisted. "Only if your answer is yes," said Allison. "If your answer is no, then you'll never know the question." "Yes or no?" asked Tiffany. "I don't know." "That's the same as no," said Laura. "But I really don't know," said Kristen. "Then it's no," Tiffany said coldly. Kristen sighed. The three girls turned their back on her and started to walk away. "Wait," Kristen said. They turned around. "Okay, yes." "Good," said Laura. "Come to my house after school." "But what's the question?" asked Kristen. "We'll tell you at my house," said Laura. "Oh, and bring an extra pair of underpants with you." Kristen had no choice. She had already said yes. Gabriel was standing inside the library. He had to stay in during recess and help put books away, because he had goofed off the day before during library period. He could see out through the tinted windows, but nobody on the outside could see in. He could see Laura, Tiffany, Allison, and Kristen. He could hear everything they said. He watched Kristen walk away. "Whew," said Tiffany. "I thought she was going to say no for sure," said Allison. Laura smiled. "Pig City must be kept secret," she said. "That's the most important thing," did Gabriel. 5. Gabriel. Mr. Doyle was in the middle of teaching the class the difference between adjectives and adverbs. Gabriel understood the difference the first time it was explained. He usually understood things the first time they were explained. That was one reason why he was always getting into trouble. He would get bored and have to find something else to do. What is Pig City? He wondered. Why does Kristen have to bring an extra pair of underpants? He looked at Laura. She sat 3 desks to the left of him. Her Pig City cap was pulled down tight over her long brown hair. He thought she had beautiful hair. He knew the story behind it, how she never told a lie. It made it even prettier to him. She was staring intently at Mr. Doyle, hanging on every word he said. Gabriel wished she would look at him like that some day. "If she asked me to answer yes or no, I'd say yes right away," he thought. "I don't even care what the question is." The problem was that whenever he tried to talk to her, his mind would go blank on him. He could never think of anything to say except for oink oink. It was stupid. He knew it was stupid, yet he said it anyway. He opened his desk and took out a piece of paper and a pencil. "Dear Laura," he wrote. He chewed his eraser, then continued. "I know all about Pig City. Don't worry. I promise not to tell anybody." He smiled. He hoped it would trick her into telling him what Pig City was. Plus, she'd like him for not telling anybody. They could share the secret together. "You have very pretty hair. Love, Gabriel." He read it over. "Dear Laura, I know all about Pig City. Don't worry. I promise not to tell anybody. You have very pretty hair. Love, Gabriel." It was terrible. I practically told her I loved her, he thought. The eraser on his pencil was chewed and wet, so he got a clean eraser from his desk. First he erased dear. His father called his mother dear. It was like calling her darling or sweetie pie. He wrote hey in place of dear. He erased the words very pretty and love, too. He tried to think of what to write instead of love. He thought about sincerely or yours truly, but he didn't like either of those either. He wrote your humble servant. He had seen it in a book once and thought it was funny. Laura will think it's funny too, he thought. It will show her how clever I am. He read it again. Hey, Laura, I know all about Pig City. Don't worry, I promise not to tell anybody. You have a lot of hair. Your humble servant, Gabriel. Much better. He folded it into quarters and wrote Laura's name on the outside. He waited until after school, until after Laura left the room, then put it in her desk. 6. Sheila. Sheila sat behind Gabriel. She watched him write the note, although she couldn't see what it said. She watched him put it in Laura's desk. She had guessed it would be for Laura. Gabriel was always staring at Laura. It made her sick. She hated Laura. She hated her hair. She thought Laura was very conceited the way she swished it around when she walked like she was a queen. She didn't believe that stuff about Laura never telling a lie, either. Sheila had frizzy hair. She often lay awake at night and dreamed about setting Laura's hair on fire or sneaking into Laura's house and putting hair remover into her bottle of shampoo. She waited for Gabriel to leave, then opened Laura's desk and removed the note. Hey, Laura, I know all about Pig City. Don't worry, I promise not to tell anybody. You have a lot of hair. Your humble servant, Gabriel. Sheila's blood boiled. It was so obvious he was in love with Laura. She was about to rip up the note, then stopped. She smiled. She looked through Laura's desk for a pencil with a good eraser. She thought a moment, then erased the whole second sentence. In its place, she wrote, "If you don't kiss me, I will tell the whole school." She laughed. She erased a lot of and wrote ugly. When she finished, the note looked like this. Hey, Laura, I know all about Pig City. If you don't kiss me, I will tell the whole school. You have ugly hair. Your humble servant, Gabriel. She folded it back along the original folds and returned it to Laura's desk. Then she broke Laura's pencil. 7. Insurance. Laura, Allison, and Tiffany sat on the front step of Laura's house, sucking root beer popsicles while they waited for Kristen. She should get contacts, said Allison. She's cute, especially for a smart girl, but she'd look a lot better without those huge glasses of hers. Tiffany agreed. Laura didn't say anything. She had accidentally bitten off a large chunk of her popsicle, and it was freezing the roof of her mouth. She suffered in silent agony as she waited for the chunk to melt down, small enough to swallow. For the moment, it was all she cared about. Her eyes watered. Kristen pedaled her blue 10-speed bicycle to a stop on the sidewalk in front of them. She was out of breath. Laura swallowed what was left of her frozen chunk of root beer. Her mouth slowly warmed. Did you bring it? She asked. Kristen nodded. In my backpack. Tiffany looked around for a place to throw her popsicle stick, then finally stuck it in her shirt pocket. She walked behind Kristen and reached into her backpack with her sticky fingers. Why'd you bring so many books? She asked. Oh, you know, Kristen, said Allison, always reading. Kristen hated to read. She brought the books because she needed something to cover up her underpants. Got 'em, Tiffany exclaimed. She triumphantly held Kristen's underpants high in the air. They were white with a pink waistband. You don't have to show the whole world, said Kristen. Her face was almost as red as her glasses. Take them to the clubhouse, said Laura. The 4 girls went through the gate to the backyard and on into the doghouse. There Laura told Kristen the question that she had already answered. Do you want to join Pig City? She taught her the secret salute. Kristen was greatly impressed. You can't tell anybody, Allison warned, even if they torture you or threaten to kill you. I won't, Kristen promised. Your underpants are your insurance, said Laura. If you tell anybody anything about Pig City, anything at all, we will take your underpants to school and show them to all the boys. Kristen gasped. I won't tell, never. She would rather have been tortured and killed than have her underpants shown to all the boys. Tiffany got the treasure chest out from under the bed. Allison added Kristen's name to the list. Pig City. Laura, President. Tiffany, Vice President. Allison, Secretary. Kristen, Underpants. Allison put the list and Kristen's underwear into the treasure chest. Then Tiffany shoved it back under the bed. They didn't show Kristen what they had each given as insurance. She wasn't allowed to know. There was a good reason for that. If Kristen broke her vow of secrecy and they showed her underpants to the whole school, she might try to get revenge by telling everybody that Laura was in love with Mr. Doyle, or Tiffany was ticklish, or Allison liked to pose in the nude. The 4 girls solemnly raised their fists to their noses. Welcome to Pig City, said Laura. 8. Debbie. Debbie was hanging upside down on the monkey bars. Laura, Allison, Tiffany, and Kristen looked upside down to her. There were still 10 minutes before school started. There was going to be a math test first thing. Debbie always hung upside down before tests. She said that all her blood went to her head and helped her think better. They gave her the same choice they had given Kristen. Yes or no? Asked Tiffany. Yes, Debbie answered right away. She was good at making quick decisions, especially when all her blood was in her head. They told her to come to Laura's after school. You forgot to tell her to bring an extra pair of underpants, said Kristen as they walked away. Everybody has to have a different kind of insurance, Laura explained. What will Debbie's be? Asked Kristen. You're not allowed to know, said Tiffany. That's why everybody's has to be different. Don't worry, said Allison. Laura will think of something good for Debbie. Laura lifted her cap, shook her hair back, and put it back on. The class lined up, then filed into Mr. Doyle's room. Everyone laughed. On the blackboard were the words, "Pigs are best." Laura had sneaked in early again. Mr. Doyle erased her message. He walked over to the side of the board and began to write something under the word dictionary. Immediately everyone became quiet. They waited to see whose name he'd put there. Whoever it was going to have to stay after school and copy a dictionary page. Laura wasn't worried. He can't possibly know it's me. Not for sure. Mr. Doyle stepped away from the board. Under the word dictionary he had drawn a rectangle. Next to the rectangle he had written the number 2. "When I find out who's been writing on the board," he said, "I will put his or her name inside the box." He looked directly at Laura. "That person will have to copy 2 dictionary pages, one for yesterday and one for today." Laura smiled. "You better make it 3, she thought. There will be another one for tomorrow." Mr. Doyle told everyone to take out a pencil and paper for the math test. The class groaned. He handed a pile of tests to Lindsay and asked her to please pass them out. Laura opened her desk. She spotted the folded piece of paper with her name on it and smiled. She loved notes. She made sure Mr. Doyle wasn't watching, then quickly unfolded it. Her smile disappeared. "Hey, Laura, I know all about Pig City. If you don't kiss me, I will tell the whole school. You have ugly hair. Your humble servant, Gabriel." She read it 3 times, then glanced at Gabriel. He was looking at her and grinning from ear to ear. He touched his fist to his nose. She looked away. Lindsay laid the math test on her desk. Laura tried to stay calm. She knew Gabriel might still be watching her, so she didn't want to appear to be upset. She had to act like she was in control. She saw her pencil had been broken, too. She wondered if Gabriel did that, too. Since the test had already started, she couldn't ask to borrow another pencil from anyone. She used the broken one half for writing and one half for erasing. The first question was a word problem. Question 1. Count Dracula drank 7 gallons of blood every 2 weeks. How many quarts of blood did he drink a day? Mr. Doyle always tried to make his test questions interesting. Laura usually appreciated his cleverness. This time, however, she had more important things on her mind. "If he thinks I have ugly hair, why does he want to kiss me? And how does he know about Pig City? He can't. It's impossible," she fumed. Except she knew it wasn't impossible because he had written the note. He knew the secret salute, too. Okay, she thought, he probably saw me come out of the building yesterday morning, so he knows I wrote on the board. He must have seen me give the salute, too. And my cap says Pig City, so that's how he knows the name of the club. Your humble servant? No matter what, she decided there was no way she would kiss him. She hated him. She tried to concentrate on the test. I wish somebody would drink Gabriel's blood. 2 gallons a day, until he shriveled up like a prune. She wrote 2 gallons as the answer to the first problem. She couldn't tell Tiffany or Allison about the note. She felt she was somehow to blame. If she was, then Allison and Tiffany would have to show her declaration of love to everybody in the school, including Mr. Doyle. Question 2. Molly Morbid made mini meatballs. From 1 pound of meat, she made 9 meatballs. She had 4½ pounds of meat. How many meatballs did Molly Morbid make? But if I don't kiss him, he'll tell everyone, and then Allison and Tiffany will show my declaration of love to Mr. Doyle anyway. Pig City will be ruined, too. She shook her head. I can't do that to Allison or Tiffany or Kristen, especially after the way we built it up to her. And what would we tell Debbie after school today? I have to kiss Gabriel. I have no choice. Gabriel's a meatball. She divided 9 by 4½ and wrote 2 for her answer. Except even if I kiss him, how do I know he still won't tell everybody about Pig City? He might tell everybody I kissed him, too. Question 3. 3x plus 15 equals 39. What is the value for x? What if I tell him I'll kiss him only if he'll give insurance? She laughed. Do you find the test amusing, Laura? Asked Mr. Doyle. She looked up. She knew Mr. Doyle thought she had laughed at one of his questions. Even though Mr. Doyle wrote humorous word problems, you weren't supposed to laugh at them. It was sort of a game between him and the class. But she hadn't laughed at one of his questions. She had laughed at the thought of making Gabriel give her a pair of his underpants. I was just thinking, she said. That's good, Laura, said Mr. Doyle. You should think when you are taking a test. It sometimes helps. She returned to the test. She subtracted 15 from 39 and multiplied by 3. X equals 72. She had never kissed a boy before. She thought it was something she probably should do before next year. She didn't want to go to junior high inexperienced. The thought of kissing Gabriel excited her a little bit. It also made her a little sick to her stomach. 9. Laura's reply. Tiffany, Allison, and Laura planned Debbie's insurance during lunch. Laura tried to look happy despite the sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. "Okay, how's this?" asked Tiffany. "We'll tell her she has to call up a boy on the phone. Then we can tape the phone conversation on Laura's tape recorder." "That's good," said Allison. "And if Debbie tells anybody about Pig City, we'll play the tape for the whole class to hear. She'll have to tell the boy she loves him." "Passionately," Tiffany said with great emotion. "She'll have to say she loves him passionately." Allison laughed at the way Tiffany said that word. "She'll have to disguise her voice," said Laura, trying to get in on the fun, "so the boy won't know who she is." Tiffany and Allison continued to plan what Debbie would have to say to the boy, but Laura's mind was elsewhere. When she returned to class, she tore a piece of paper out of her notebook. Using her broken pencil, she wrote, "Hey, Gabriel, I think you're uglier than a two-headed frog. I'll kiss you, but only to save Pig City, not because I like you. Yours truly, Laura. P.S. I'd rather kiss a rattlesnake." She gave up on the idea of asking him for insurance. He might make her give him insurance instead. She'd just have to trust him. She frowned. She folded the note in half, then in half again, and then one more time. On the outside she wrote, "For Gabriel. Anybody else who reads this is a worm-nosed snail-eater." She passed it to the girl who sat next to her, who passed it to the boy next to her, who threw it at Gabriel. It bounced off the side of his head and landed on the floor. Gabriel grabbed for it. "Gabriel," said Mr. Doyle, "bring that here." "What?" asked Gabriel as he tried to hide it under his chair. "You know what," said Mr. Doyle. "Bring the note here and write your name on the blackboard under dictionary." Gabriel picked up the note and slowly walked down the aisle to the front of the room. He read the outside but didn't dare open it in front of the class. Laura was slow to read all notes out loud to the class. "Don't read it," she prayed. "Just throw it away, please." Mr. Doyle held out his hand. Gabriel dropped the note into it. "Who's it from?" Gabriel shrugged. Mr. Doyle read the outside of the note first to himself, then out loud. "For Gabriel. Anyone else who reads this is a worm-nosed snail-eater." Everyone laughed. "Maybe I better not read it," he joked. "Read it," chorused the class. "Don't, please don't," Laura thought with all her might. Mr. Doyle slowly began to unfold the note. Laura stood up. "Don't read it, Mr. Doyle," she said. "I wrote it. Please don't read it." "Laura, I'm surprised at you," said Mr. Doyle. "You know you're not supposed to pass notes in class." "I know. Please don't read it." "Read it," shouted Sheila. Mr. Doyle looked at the note, still folded in half. "Come here, Laura," he said. She walked to the front of the room next to Gabriel. "All right," said Mr. Doyle. "I won't read it." He gave her back the note. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Doyle," she said. "Thank you very much." "You read it," he said. She turned white. "Read it aloud to the class," he told her. "If you can say it to Gabriel, then you can say it to everyone." She swallowed, then slowly turned and faced the class. Her legs wobbled beneath her. She looked at Allison's sympathetic face in the front row. "We're waiting," said Mr. Doyle. She took a deep breath. She couldn't believe this was happening. She lifted her cap, brushed her hair off her face, and put the cap back on. She didn't say a word. "Throw it away," said Mr. Doyle. She didn't have to be told twice. She tore the note to shreds and dropped it in the trash. "Let this be a lesson," said Mr. Doyle. "Never put anything in a letter you wouldn't want published in the front page of a newspaper. A word to the wise. Now go write your name on the board." Laura gladly wrote her name on the blackboard under the word dictionary, under the rectangle. "You too, Gabriel," said Mr. Doyle. "Why me?" he protested. "I didn't write it. I didn't even get to read it." Several kids laughed. Mr. Doyle glared at him. He walked behind Laura and waited for her to finish writing her name. Their fingers touched as she handed him the piece of chalk.